Great. Thank you, everyone. So welcome to part 2 of our policy seminar webinar training with Abbie Steiner. And I'm going to pass the microphone over to her and let her take it away. And we really thank you all for coming. And we're looking forward to seeing what you have to say, Abbie. Thank you.
Great. So last time I introduced myself. My name is Abbie Steiner. I'm just about to finish my graduate degrees in food policy and public health here at Tufts. And I worked last summer with the Union of Concerned Scientists to make the resource that you can see I'm holding in this picture. I was holding this in the winter. I'm definitely not wearing a sweater now. And this resource was designed to help communities get involved in food policy change, starting with identifying the starting with all of the different aspects related to food policy and food policy change. And I'm going to just talk briefly about what's involved in this toolkit. Many of you may have already looked at this. I have a link at the end of this webinar for you to download it if you're interested in using it or in disseminating it in your community. So this resource has a number of different components. It starts by helping individuals navigate key issues related to healthy food. Those are issues at the grocery store, issues in restaurants, issues on the label and on how we understand nutrition information, issues related to the farm and also in schools. And those are all related to the policies that affect food in your community. We're going to talk today about recognizing where decisions are made and who makes them, and the importance of relationship building for influencing food policy. And this resource also has a bunch of components related to taking action on food policy change. So our agenda for today, as the title of this webinar suggests, we want, in order to take action for food policy change, we need to be able to identify the decision makers that can actually make change on the issues we care about. And we usually need to get ourselves involved with a wide variety of stakeholders and build strong relationships with them to ensure that we can actually create change on the issues that we care about. So like I already mentioned, building on the first webinar related to tracking federal, state, and local food policy, the goal of this workshop is to give you some tools for crafting a winning campaign related to food policy change. In addition to knowing about the issues and identifying and tracking issues that you care about, which we talked about last time, it's crucial to recognize who makes the decisions and how you can work in partnership with others to influence decision-making of the people with the power. All campaigns about any social change issue, not just food policy, come down to figuring out what you want, who can give you what you want, and how you will convince that person to give that to you. I'll give you an overview of campaign strategy, and then we'll work through a hypothetical example that I created to help illustrate how campaign strategizing can work. So over the course of the next period of time, we're going to discuss the basic principles of campaign strategy. We're going to look a little bit at who makes decisions, especially related to food policy. We're going to discuss what I've created, the Chester side scenario. Stay tuned for that. We're going to use the Chester side scenario to explore the steps for successful campaign strategy. We're going to think just briefly about asset mapping, and then we'll wrap up, and there'll be time at the end for questions. So the first principle of strategic campaign planning is choosing the right decision maker. Because time and resources are finite, you want to choose the right person who can actually give you what you want. If you wanted to change zoning rules around keeping chickens in your backyard, as much as a state senator might be interested in helping you, if only the local zoning commission can vote on changes to zoning code, putting time into convincing your state senator to support this change wouldn't be worth your while. So this is a small, compact list of some potential decision makers, especially in relation to what they can do on food issues. So some examples that are listed here include any elected policymakers, state representatives, governors, county commissioners, city council members, mayors, in tribal spaces, tribal leaders have decision-making power, and as I already alluded to with local decision-making, the same is true in tribal communities. There can be different organizational structures for governance, and so you'll always want to make sure you understand how decisions are made in every community you're working in. The Zoning Commission makes rules around land use. City planners are responsible for drafting and thinking about planning documents and making plans for the city. And city planners have gotten, in recent years, have gotten more and more involved in food systems planning too. School boards and administrators make decisions related to food in school spaces. And then public institutions can also have, even though they're not necessarily governmental, they can have a large influence on food-related issues. So back to our campaign strategy. Once you have a sense of your decision maker, you want to research your target and be as specific as possible. Once you know who the decision maker most able to influence your desired outcome is, you want to learn more about their politics, their allegiances, their loyalties. Ultimately, you want to optimize your power to get the most bang for your buck. And we're going to talk more about this when we think through the Chester side example. The third principle of campaign strategy is articulating your strategy. You want to take a step back and think about the theory for why you can win. It's important to think through your rationale for your efforts because people are going to want to join in with you because they see the value in what you're proposing and they see that it's possible. And so you want to think through why your strategy is a winning strategy. And then finally, throughout your campaigning process, you want to evaluate, you want to think through your power map. We're going to talk more about power maps a little later. And you want to continually evolve your strategy over time. So those are the main principles of a campaign strategy, but these are the 6 steps of strategizing. The first step is laying out the possible decision makers who can get you to your goal and choosing the right decision maker. It's important first and foremost to identify what it is you want to do. And once you know what you want to do, you're able to see who is able to actually make a decision that could influence change around the issue that you care about. The second thing you do, especially with a decision maker that is voting on an issue and has a body that has multiple decision makers, you want to do a vote chart, and you prioritize your swing votes. We're going to talk through all of these. Third, you want to determine the type of campaign you're launching. Fourth, you want to brainstorm and prioritize the top influences. And then fifth, using all the information that you've gathered from the first 4 steps, you'll articulate your strategy. And then finally and throughout, you want to gut check and evaluate and make sure that you're staying on track. So to illustrate these, I created a hypothetical scenario for us to consider as a group. While I know that the webinar format is not as ideal for an interactive discussion as an in-person workshop, I strongly encourage you to share your ideas by the chat function or the hand-raising function when I ask for group brainstorming. So I want to thank you in advance for your participation. Great. So as I mentioned, I created this hypothetical scenario to help us understand how to strategize in a campaign. This is the example that I used. You'll see in a second is a food policy related issue that a lot of people are interested in and that a lot of people can get involved in in their communities. So Chesterside is a small suburban municipality outside of the Cincinnati, Ohio metro area. Around 30,000 people live there. It has a mayor and city council style government. Strong connections exist to the surrounding regional food system. There are a lot of young families, working and middle class, and there are various backgrounds in Chesterside. The problem in Chesterside is, despite national movement to make school food more healthy, Chesterside 1 public schools is behind the curve on implementing stronger nutrition standards. The district serves almost all of the 6,450 school-aged children living in the Chesterside area, though the district has implemented minimum standards mandated by the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act. They haven't taken the steps to put anything stronger into place, especially with regard to competitive foods. Competitive foods they're named that way because the sale of competitive foods competes with national school lunch program mandated meals. So in most schools, there's a school lunch program that's sponsored in part or in collaboration with the federal government, and the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act, which was passed in 2010, put into place much stronger standards to ensure the nutritional quality of meals served in schools. The competitive foods are foods that are served in vending machines or a la carte items that children are able to purchase with their own money. And while there are some changes that were also part of the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act that meant to make it so that competitive foods were healthier, the standards are pretty minimum on the federal level, and many districts and many areas are working to put more stringent standards into place for competitive foods, but this has not yet happened in Chesterside. So we have formed a group called Concerned About Chesterside, CAC, and we are a community group working to improve competitive school food standards. Most of us have children attending a Chesterside public school, and anyone who doesn't have a Chesterside public school student currently are concerned because our kids will probably enter the school system soon. So we want to, our main goal is to change the competitive food standards, and we need to work together to think through how we can actually make that happen. So, thinking about our campaign strategy steps, the first thing we have to do is list all possible decision makers who can make a decision that will get us to our goal. Again, our goal is to change competitive school food standards, make them more stringent so that the only things that are available outside of the school lunch program are healthy options that we want our kids to be choosing. That's our goal. And we need to think through who might actually be able to make a decision about that. So this is a first opportunity to get involved. Who might be able to make decisions about implementing stronger school food policies? We can think about decision makers at the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government. We can think about local Chesterside government, Ohio state government, federal government, and other decision makers that might be able to influence this issue. So I'm gonna stop talking for a minute, and I'm gonna let you think about potential ways that potential individuals or groups that might be able to make decisions about implementing stronger school food policies.
And I would just encourage you, as you're listening, to think about both this example and how this might apply to your own situation, and if you have an issue that you'd like to work for change towards in your life and your community, just to think about how this kind of example can inform your thought process around that issue as well.
Okay, so we're going to go through what I've brainstormed as some of the key decision makers related to this issue of increasing the stringency of the nutrition standards related to competitive foods. So the Ohio State Governor could mandate competitive food standards improvement through an executive mandate. The governor, it's important to remember, though, that the governor has received thousands of dollars in campaign contributions from the snack food industry. Chesterfied is one of the more, additionally, Chesterfied is one of more than 250 cities and 680 villages in the state of Ohio. So Chesterfied is just one of, one small fish in a big pond. Our state representative, who's also received campaign contributions from the snack food industry, happens to be a good friend of the governor. So that's one option. The Chesterfied One Public School District School Board can decide to make competitive school food standards more stringent by vote of the school board. They can put that policy into place. So the school board is made up of 3 members, Tom, Robert, and Susan, and the Board of the school board is elected. The third is the Ohio General Assembly, which is the Ohio State Legislature. They have the ability to pass a law to make competitive school food standards more stringent across the state. The General Assembly has 132 members, and our representative's name, or one of our representatives' names is Kathy Johnson. The fourth decision maker involved in this situation is the snack food company itself. The snack food company responsible for supplying school districts competitive food offerings could decide to change what they offer, or could institute a company-wide policy around the foods that they offer in schools. Currently, however, the company makes a lot of money with the standards as they are, and the company felt like they had made a lot of changes to align with the national standards that I mentioned already as part of the Healthy Hungry Kids Act. The fifth decision maker that we would want to consider is the court. The court in Ohio, or even the Chesterfied area courts, could mandate change if the food currently being offered was in violation of an existing law or standard. So we could hire a lawyer to figure out if indeed there are any violations. And any number of lawyers charging upwards of $250 an hour would be happy to look into it for us. So when thinking about these 5 potential decision makers, there are some general rules of thumb to consider when trying to decide which one you want to choose to focus your campaign energy on. We should usually consider that it's easier to use grassroots power to move local decision makers rather than state or federal level decision makers. It's easier if the decision maker is elected versus appointed. And by and large, we want to choose the lowest ranking person that can make a decision. Again, those are the people that we as the community have easier access to. However, it's important to remember that if the person that is most closely, that we have the closest access to, is unlikely to side with our group and unlikely to support our goals, no matter what, it might be worthwhile to consider moving up the ladder or choosing a different decision maker. So based on this information, who might be the best decision maker to focus our campaign energy on? So I definitely think the school board is the right choice because the school board has 3 members. They live in the community that we live in, and we have a better sense of how we would influence 1 or 2 of them to get on board with us. So next, the second step in our successful campaign strategy is doing a vote chart, which is especially important if the campaign is focusing on a board or legislative body with multiple decision makers, as is the case with the school board. We need to do a vote chart and choose which decision maker to prioritize. We would want to identify who on the board, by doing very little, will side with us, who, no matter what we do, will side against us, and who might be on the fence. The people on the fence are the swing voters, and they become our primary targets. And the reason that we target the swing voters is a strategic one. We've only got a certain amount of time and resources. We don't want to waste our efforts trying to convince people that will never vote our way to do so if we have an alternative. And likewise, it's not the best use of our time to spend all our energy with people that already support us and are already on board and are already voting the way that we hope. So in this case, we are assuming that Tom, Robert, and Susan together have to, by majority, have to decide if they want to implement more stringent competitive food policy. So we need to understand how these three are voting on issues like this. So to do that, we need to learn more about these people, and we do that through a little bit of research. We do that by talking to members in the community and by building relationships with other stakeholders that might be connected to these school board members. So it turns out that Tom stepped out of his role as the president of the Foxbrook High School PTA, which is the largest high school in Chesterside, when he was elected to the school board 10 years ago. All of his kids have gone through the school system, and when he's not serving in his school board role, he teaches healthy food education at his 2-acre suburban farm, which also provides CSAs for local low-income Chesterside families. Robert and his family moved to Chesterside not too long ago, and he ran for the school board as a way to get involved in the community and potentially as a first step in a political career in the area. He has one child who will enter a Chesterside 1 elementary school this upcoming school year. We don't know too much else about him, but he did just move next door to one of the co-founders of our organization concerned about Chesterside. Susan grew up in Chesterside and is part of a family of snack food barons. Her brother owns a large snack food conglomerate that contracts with Pepsi to provide snacks in Chesterside public school vending machines and provides a la carte packaged foods in school cafeterias. The family already felt pleased to modify their offerings in keeping with the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act. And the family is very philanthropic and provides immense amounts of resources to improve school achievement through teacher training and tutoring programs. So based on this information, we would want to think about how the school board might feel about increasing the stringent, how different members of the school board might feel about increasing the stringency of competitive school food standards. So I think that they would probably vote this way. It's pretty obvious that Susan is not with us. That would be politically unfavorable for her to choose, despite being supportive of the schools, to choose to align with our issue might not work well for her politically. Tom, it pretty much seems like Tom's on board, and Tom is probably already voting in favor of our issue. You always want to be cautious of pinning someone as definitely supportive, and you want to spend some energy ensuring that Tom is going to vote your way. But for the most part, you want to spend your energy working with Robert, learning more about what's important to Robert, and giving Robert an opportunity to vote the way that we want him to. So now that we have a specific target, Robert, who is the key to us winning our campaign, we need to figure out how to get him to vote in our favor. And we need to determine how the decision, to do this, we need to choose our campaign type. And there are 3 generic types of campaigns, which I've outlined here. We need to first understand how a decision maker feels on the facts and how the politics of the situation might affect the decision maker. And those 2 pieces of information can help us understand how to choose the campaign that we want to run. And as I said, there are 3 kind of broad options: the hero option, the cover option, and the pressure campaign. It makes sense that it's really important that you decide your approach early, because this is using a hero versus cover versus pressure campaign will influence how you plan and how you message. And these campaigns escalate. The cover campaign is a higher intensity than the hero campaign, and the pressure campaign is the highest intensity. And so because of the way that they escalate, you can't start with pressure and decide, oh wait, I think actually we can make this a hero campaign. So if you're unsure, it always makes sense to try to frame your campaign in terms of the hero approach. And so the hero strategy works when the decision maker agrees with you on the facts, and if they take action, they will look good. Imagine a stage and a microphone with a spotlight. They need to see that this stage is possible, and so you want to serve it up to them on a silver platter. With this approach, you'll need less grassroots pressure and can attribute efforts to the decision maker, which will be valuable for their political career. The cover strategy works when the decision maker agrees on the issues but feels as though the politics of taking action would not be in their favor. For some reason, they can't come out publicly in support of the issue, and there's some political situation which is making them fearful of backlash. In this case, a cover campaign gives your decision maker a political excuse to do what he or she already wants to do. This will require more grassroots pressure and may require organizing more people to get involved. The pressure strategy is needed when the decision maker is not with us and needs to be convinced that taking action is in their favor. If it's not possible to choose a different decision maker, a pressure campaign might be necessary to get what you want. This is the most, as I already mentioned, this is the most escalated type of campaign and often requires the most resources and strategy. So both based on this information and based on the fact that you often want to start here and focus here, I think that Robert, the best campaign for Robert would be a hero strategy. Because we want to believe that Robert agrees that more stringent competitive food standards is a good idea, and we want him to, we believe that he'll see this as a valuable political move. So once we've decided that we're going to take a hero approach with our campaign, we need to think about who can influence Robert to actually make this change. In some situations, it's possible that you can just walk into Robert's office and talk with him about this, and he will be ready to agree. But in most cases, you really need to tap into your network of influences to really understand the best way to encourage Robert to vote in your favor. So we're going to brainstorm these specific influences for our target decision maker, and then we're going to map them on a power map. As I already, and we'll actually talk a little bit more about the power map in a second, but as I mentioned already, a power map is a tool for understanding where your power lies in relation to influencing a decision maker. And it's something that we use to look at who might have the most leverage and look to see where who we actually have access to. So which influences, which people might be able to actually make Robert commit to voting in favor of this issue, and which of those influences can we actually access? So this is my brainstormed list of potential influences for our target decision maker. Through some research, we learned that Robert cares a lot about his personal community, and he cares a lot about the school system. Another reason why he is, why he chose to run for the school board. So Robert's neighbors are examples of personal influencers. The parents that Robert knows from working with the PTA are examples of public, more specific. The general public wouldn't be a good influencer to think about because it's hard to target the general public, whereas the parents in the PTA as part of the public might be a little bit more easy to reach. It's important to think about the media in case you are planning as part of your campaign to do some type of event. So the Chesterside Daily News, paper that is published daily. Channel 7 is covering local happenings, and the WVXU radio station covers is a public radio station and has a number of segments that focus on community issues. So we talked through some of the elected officials already, but this lists out some of the elected officials. It's important to think about actually having the information that you need to help influence Robert. If we want the school board to adopt more stringent standards, we might need to help them identify more stringent standards. And luckily, in this specific case, the Institute of the IOM has already written up resources for stronger standards. And I actually have a link, if you're interested specifically in this topic, there's a link at the bottom of the slide, which again will be shared for the CDC page that gives lots of resources around strengthening competitive school foods. You might also, along the lines of experts and information, you might want to connect with educators or scholars or researchers that might be able to provide some information about this issue. For example, in this case, the University of Cincinnati is very near to Chesterside. It would be a good option.
And Abbie, can I ask a question? When you're suggesting these resources, are you choosing, it seems like you're choosing resources here or points of influence because they relate to the community and the example, but like the University of Cincinnati experts from there, you're suggesting that because those might be local experts that might be able to personally lend some influence, or were you suggesting that because those people might have particular expertise on this issue?
More the former, that it's valuable to focus in on the, while researchers can provide great insights, it's almost more valuable to have representatives of the community able to share this information and able to use this information to influence change. And sometimes, depending on the research that's being done, the information that's available is not all that accessible, either because it's physically hard to access, or it's written in such a way that it's not, it doesn't necessarily engender understanding with a broader public or with this specific decision maker. So it's valuable to bring in the people who know the most about the issue, but it's oftentimes more worthwhile to connect with local experts.
And it sounds like you're saying you want to prioritize getting help from people that might have the possibility of physically in person meeting with your decision maker, because that might lend some more weight to it. It's not just like dry facts that you're presenting. Okay. Thanks.
Exactly. And we're going to talk a little. I'm going to demonstrate that concept in a couple slides. And that actually is connected to the information that I put in this last category of other groups. There are a lot of national organizations that focus on this particular issue and that have great resources and have a really strong national presence and are really involved in influencing the federal policy and advocating for change on the federal level, that definitely have resources. But for an organization like School Food Focus, they're based in New York, and all of their work, though it's focused nationally, their team is there. And so they might be a good place to look for some of the information and for some of the resources, but they probably won't be a high priority influence. And we're going to talk about that in a second. So again, we want to think about, in creating this list, we want to think about our target's personal and professional connections, and we want to find information relevant to our campaign. So, the second option, parents that Robert knows from his work at the PTA, who might also be his neighbors, those are the people that might have the strongest influence over him, because he cares about the school system, and he cares about his community, and he cares about his neighbors. So those people might be the best people to focus on when trying to influence him to make a change, more so than the mayor or someone from the town council who might have a lot of leverage, but might be a little less accessible to us. So once you've done this, you want to actually create your power map. So this is the power map, and sometimes this power map is a little challenging to understand, because we ultimately have Robert here in the center, and we want to imagine who are the influencers, the people that were on the list that we just brainstormed. Who in that group can we easily access, and who will have the highest leverage on Robert? Some of this is just generally, some of this is will just depend on your location, and some of it will really depend on the decision maker and on what you've discovered is important to them. So for the sake of this exercise, we're going to the personal connections and the connections to the neighborhood and the work related to the school are the things that we've researched and learned are the most important things to Robert. So when we're thinking about that, we want that to be what's reflected on our power map. So I plotted a number of the examples that were listed before onto this map, and you see here that there are no options in the low leverage on Robert, and we can't easily access quadrant, because ultimately any influencer that might fall into that category isn't going to be an influencer that you want to spend your effort working with or trying to get them to be involved in helping Robert make a different decision. Ultimately, the three up in the right, the upper right quadrant, easily accessed and high leverage on Robert, those are the three that we're going to want to work with to ensure that Robert is willing and wanting to choose to participate in our campaign, and ultimately to deliver the goal that we want, which is for him to vote in favor of our more stringent nutrition standards. And so some of these things might, again, the way that this plays out on your map will look different depending on who your decision maker is in the center and who you can easily access. For example, I have both of the state senator and the state representative in the lower quadrant, because it turned out that in Concerned About Chesterside community group, we didn't know anyone that knew those representatives or those politicians. But it's possible that you might have someone in your group that knows those politicians and can bring them in to actually play some role in leveraging Robert's decision making. So that's something that your group will have to think about when trying to decide who should we focus on. And so the three groups in green are the ones that we're going to focus on. So the fifth part of the successful campaign strategy is actually articulating your strategy. And what's on this slide is a generic, what is called a campaign strategy Mad Lib. This could be used for any campaign strategy, and I borrowed this from an organization that does campaign strategizing around environmental issues. So a different space than food policy, but it works the same. And so the first thing we want to identify is what is the entity that has the power to give us our goal. That's what we did when we were thinking through the governor and the school board and the General Assembly and the groups like that. We need to know, once we've chosen that entity, we need to know what actually has to happen for us to achieve our goal. And so in this case, we needed 2 out of 3 votes. We needed a majority of the school board to win. So that's the number. We need 2 out of 3 votes. We know that we have 1 vote because we're pretty sure that Tom was on our side. And so that meant we needed 1 more vote. And we're going to target our specific decision maker that goes in that second name space to get the vote. So then we want to think about whether or not our decision maker agrees or disagrees with the issue, and whether or not politics are good or bad for them to do the right thing. And then by demonstrating the support from the important influences that we mapped on our power map, we can choose the specific type of campaign strategy that we want to move forward with. And so I did that for us here. Again, the school board has the power to give us our goal. We need 2 or 3 votes to win. We have that 1 vote from Tom, and we also need 1 more vote. So we're going to work with Robert to get that second vote. And we think Robert agrees with the facts of the situation, that improved competitive food standards are good for our schools, good for our kids, and that him choosing to act on this is good for him as a member of the school board, and potentially good for long-term political career. And so by demonstrating support from the influences of the parents, his neighbors, and the PTA, we can create an irresistible opportunity for him to do the right thing. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this part, but once you've again articulated your campaign strategy, you want to set you actually want to move forward with figuring out the best ways to influence Robert's decision making. So one example would be to work with those parents, either that are connected to the PTA or that are neighbors and otherwise involved with concerns about Chestercide. And maybe your goal would be, your tactic would be to have parents write Robert letters about how important it is to improve the standards of competitive school food. And you want to set a concrete quantitative goal for that tactic. So the tactic is writing letters with like 100 letters, and we want that over a timeline. So we want to get 25 letters over these 4 months, August, September, October, and November. And you would need to be working with the PTA and with other parent groups to encourage more parents to write those letters and to meet those goals. So I think another really important thing to think about in trying to understand the best ways to meet your goals and to set tactics that are actionable and set goals that are realizable is to think about what your assets are. You want to you can definitely think about, a lot of times in thinking about community development, there's a focus on what's needed. You know, we need to improve the standards because we're concerned about our kids' health. But we also want to focus on assets. And so one asset that I think is true in Chestercide, the made-up community that I created for this, is parents care and parents are involved and parents want to participate. So that's an asset that we want to focus on, and we want to use that. We want to make sure that we use that asset to our advantage. But we also want to think about how will parents benefit by participating in this campaign with us? And I think the obvious reason is because, like the members of Concerned About Chestercide, parents care about the food actions for their kids and want to create healthy, easy choices for their kids to be accessing food that is right for them at this important stage in development. So thinking both in terms of who are the assets and who can help you meet their goals, and how can the people that are participating with us benefit from participating will really help get more people to join you and get more people on board. This is another really small diagram. This is also from the toolkit, but these are some examples of stakeholders and how they could be valuable in different types of food policy campaigns. This is not specific to the competitive school food policy, but are all really important groups to think about when trying to engage in food policy change. On the very basic level, don't forget about community members. The community, like yourself, we're all part of a community. We all care, and we can all play a role in being key allies for creating strength and change around these issues that we care about. And then it's always interesting to imagine some unlikely partners, because who knows who might actually be willing to partner with you and provide some influence over, again, the key decision makers, and encourage the decision makers to engage in a way that is meaningful. So that's everything for the workshop. Maybe now it makes sense to stop and take some questions if there are any.
Great, thank you so much, Abbie. Sorry for that little pause. I had to unmute myself. So let's see, just checking the questions here. I'm not sure if we have a specific one from the attendees, but so I have some questions that I wondered if you wanted to speak to. So this is a great example, especially for people that want to change school food, and the example applies very readily to a lot of communities and a lot of different food issues. But I wondered if you might have some other examples of issues that might not be decided or might not be influenced through a vote situation. And I can't even think of examples myself, but if you could, and then kind of speak to how you go about influencing those kinds of things.
Sure. Yeah, I think that that's really important, that votes are often a great way to try to focus your energy, but it's not always a vote that decides an issue, especially in smaller spaces where it's not only where it's not just elected officials making decisions about issues. I think an example that comes to mind, not in the school space anymore, but in like a hospital space, where hospital administrators are setting policies around the types of foods that are served in hospital spaces. And the hospital is this great example of a place where only nutritious food should be available, and the fact that so many hospitals have contracts with McDonald's and with other fast food companies is really problematic. And so that's an example of working with hospital administrators to change their policies and to rethink how they the types of food that they're offering in their operations. And that can be really tricky, because it's possible that an organization like McDonald's is paying a nice premium to have that location, as an example of a place where if you have an emergency and you have to go to the emergency room and you don't have the opportunity to pack your healthy meal, and you're hungry and your partner or your family member is in the hospital for a long time, that might be the only option. And so they can really capitalize on that. And so that might require that might be more of a pressure campaign, because you might need to really encourage administrators to make a totally different choice and help them understand why that choice is good for them.
Great, thank you. And I guess some other questions that I kind of have are, and others I think also have, are what about when you say, with the example of school food, you decide that you do want to launch a campaign like this or influence policy. Do you have any advice or sense of how long it takes for these things to happen? And then I see we do have some more questions now from the attendees, so we'll get to those right after this.
So that's a great question, and I feel like I didn't do a good job of this in the workshop this far, but these types of campaigns take a really long time, and it's really important to recognize that that influencing Robert and getting Robert to change his mind about a specific vote may take a really long time and may also require a number of different strategies. It's possible that in addition to us working really hard to influence Robert to vote in the way that we want, we might also, as somebody is actually asking this question, we might also have the snack food industry that's thriving in Chesterside might also be identifying influencers that can encourage Robert to make a different choice. And so the key there is persistence and planning and a willingness to stick with it for the long term, and also to plan strategically around when are these votes happening? Are these things that are scheduled at the end of the school year, at the beginning of the school year, at some specific points in the school board session, or are they something that a community can present an issue before the school board and then a vote can happen? Because if that's the thing, if that's the issue, if it's something like that, you might have a really concentrated effort that can then turn around to change pretty quickly. But if it's something that's much longer term, you'll need to develop a number of different tactics for really influencing Robert and ensuring that Robert actually, again, votes in your favor. And you'll need to also come up with tactics related to keeping any influence from anyone that might be trying to detract from your efforts, minimizing that influence. And so I guess the example, the kind of like the most notable example that I can think of in this specific situation is I mentioned that the snack food industry is pretty happy to contribute campaign funding to political people, and so maybe it's possible that and obviously we can just continue to cross our fingers about campaign finance reform, but until then it's possible that there would be a way for the snack food companies to let Robert know that they'd be happy to help him run for a more prominent office, and that might detract from our ability to encourage him to keep with our goal. And I think that's when you might need to escalate from a hero campaign to more of a cover campaign or even a pressure campaign, where you're again tapping into what you've researched are the things that mean the most to Robert: the community, the other parents, his neighbors, the school system, and really bring out a lot more people, because when you don't have power and money, your main source of power is in people. And so continuing to organize more people to participate in your campaign and encourage them to get on board will be one important way to minimize the influence from potential detractors.
And it sounds like you're pointing out that one of the things that you consider when you're deciding what type of campaign to launch is whether there are detractors or like what other influences might be at play influencing that person.
Yeah, so like the classic example of a cover campaign is with the Keystone Pipeline. Obama is pretty outspoken about his support of taking proactive action on climate change issues, and we know that he's made that clear, but he still feels a lot of pressure from industry to follow through, and we've seen him feeling pressure. And so a cover campaign would be one in which he could say to the industry, you know, I recognize why you're pressuring me, but I have this massive environmental movement that's giving me the cover to actually move forward with the decisions as I want to. And so that's kind of a classic environmental example. I was actually trying to think of a food policy one and I couldn't, but I can keep brainstorming.
Great, thanks. So I guess we're getting down to about 1:30, so I think we should wrap up, but I just do have one more question. I think for people who may be listening to this and they're planning on launching campaigns themselves and they may or may not have experience with it, can you just give any kind of advice slash encouragement for people that get started and maybe it's slower than they expect? Maybe they hit some roadblocks or maybe there's delays, and what would you consider to be a reasonable and like happy outcome for a local nutrition campaign, like kind of like the one you described in the example, like how long would it take, at what point would you be like, yeah, this went really well and we got it to happen in only this amount of time? I don't know, just your thoughts for just to try to send people off with some encouragement so they can stick with it. It's probably going to slow down in the middle of whatever they're doing.
So I might answer a different question in an effort to, I think, give you an answer that fulfills that need. I think that the most, and I didn't spend enough time talking about it, but there is more information about this in the Food Policy Toolkit, and there are lots of great resources about asset-based community development and really building strong partnerships. I think what makes any social change campaign successful is really intentionally bringing in a broad community to support the work. And so the number one piece of advice that I can give is to just never do this alone. This is work that cannot be done alone, because I said this already, I'm going to say it again, when we don't have the same type of resources that large corporations or other entities have when it comes to money. And so the only way to combat the power of money is with the power of people. And so bringing people together, connecting with people that are engaged in these issues already, there's no reason to create something new if it's already existing. So connecting with food policy councils, connecting with organizations that are doing school food-related organizing. Somebody mentioned connecting with wellness committees, that's a thing that has changed. There are a lot more school districts are prioritizing wellness, and that's not just food, but it does connect very closely with food, and the people that are working on wellness issues care about food issues. Connecting with the people that care about the issues, that are working on the issues, and building as broad of a network as you can, and really diversifying your skill set and diversifying the types of influencers that you have will really enable you to feel successful and feel like you're able to commit and continue fighting and continue moving forward, even when it's feeling like it's becoming really challenging, or feeling like, wait, I've spent so much time on this and we've made no progress. And so I think thinking a little less about meeting specific time goals and thinking more about meeting specific kind of network goals might be a better way to think about success. And even if Chesterside and the concern about Chesterside Community Group, even if they weren't able to actually implement this change at this time, they've built this nice community, they've built this nice network, and can potentially move forward with this type of policy change in the future.
All right. Well, thank you, Abbie. Thank you so much for your time delivering this. And as we have on screen now, food toolkit that Abbie worked on when she worked for the Union of Concerned Scientists can be downloaded at this address. Her email's there. I am going to send out a recording of both the webinars and the slides. So you'll be getting that in your email. And for those who didn't attend, we'll also send that to you. And I'll also post it on plantbasedresearch.org so we can make use of it in the future. And I just want to thank you again. That was so valuable. I really, really appreciate your time, and thank you for coming. And thank you, everyone, for being part of this. And thank you for all the work that you're doing and will do in the future. It's much appreciated. Signing off.